oftentimes we don't understand stress. There are a number of myths that we have around stress, and we can hear it quite often in the way that we speak about stress. Because you may hear people say things like, gosh, work is so stressful right now. Oh, home life is so stressful right now. You've heard that? You may have even heard yourself say something like that. Now, you see, what's interesting in that is that there is a mindset that goes with that is basically saying that at work or at home, the environment is so saturated with stress. The only thing I can do when I go to work or I go home is to be stressed. You know, it's like saying, at work there's a sprinkler on, through the fire system, and the sprinkler's on and it's raining down on us, so much so that if I go to work, guess what? I'm going to get wet. I cannot not get wet. And if it's on at home, then I'm going to end up at home, and I cannot not get wet at home. And we'll use that with regards to stress as if the environment contains stress, and therefore there's nothing we can do but be stressed. Now, the interesting thing with that, and something that I'll often tell people, is do you realize that there is no stress in the environment? At which point they usually want to hit me. But I'll say, no, when you think about it, there's absolutely no stress in the environment. What there is that you're experiencing is pressure. Now, this is a really important distinction to have. You see, if you imagine it as a submarine going down under the water, as it gets deeper and deeper and deeper, the pressure increases on the hull of the sub. But the hull isn't stressed, or I should say distressed, until such point as the pressure exceeds the resilience of the hull. Make sense? So in one sense, what is stress? Stress is when pressure exceeds your resilience. But here's the good news in all of this. We can strengthen your resilience, because where does your resilience primarily come from? Your hull, so to speak, to use that language, is what is occurring between your ears. Your hull is your mindset or your belief system, your perspective about what's going on. And you see, as that gets strengthened, you can actually handle more and more pressure as you encounter it. And so one of the tips, just to start with, as we think about stress that can help us in overcoming it, is by separating out the language. So I'll encourage people, rather than saying, gosh, I'm so stressed, or work is so stressed, or life is so stressed, to change your language to something like, I'm experiencing a number of pressures at work right now. Now, you see, when you do something like that, what it does is it brings stress back to you, and it means there's pressure out here in the environment, which means I now get to choose. If there's pressure, I get to choose my response to pressure. How do I want to respond to this? What am I going to do? I want to handle this like a boss. I want to pray. I want to understand God's perspective here. I want to recognize that this pressure is not going to overcome me, but in Him I am an overcomer. I'm going to take a very different perspective here as a result. You see, when you simply assume you're stressed, your mind automatically assumes there's nothing you can do but be stressed. When you start to understand, no, there's pressure in the environment, now I get to choose a response. Now you begin to strengthen your hull. You see, in that, choosing your response, choosing your perspective is so important, because this is what feeds into who we are in our resilience. You know, one of the things that I'll say in this is that what is stress? Stress is in fact your body's response. It's my response, my body's response, getting tense, getting short of breath. My body's response to a belief that I cannot cope with what's being asked. I don't have the resources to cope. As soon as you believe you don't have the resources to cope what's being asked, whether you've been asked to come up on stage and speak, whether you've been asked to take on a new portfolio, whether you're being asked by your wife to mind read and know what her emotions are. I mean, whatever it is, It's the belief, I don't have the resources to cope. And that's what produces you to get stressed. Because when you think about it, you've got two people going to work facing exactly the same pressures, and yet one seems to be beside themselves, filled with stress, and the other person seems to be relaxed and calm. Why is that? Because each of them is believing something different. The one who's stressed is probably believing, gosh, this is too hard for me. I can't do this. This is overwhelming. I'm going to stuff it. I'm going to be a failure. This is all going to turn to custard. Whereas the one who is actually calm may realize, in the end, this won't really matter. If this turns to custard, I can handle that. I've got resources to deal with what's going to come my way. I've got resources around me to help me in what's going on. People will understand. This will be reasonable. There's something different that's occurring in their mindset. All because they're believing they've got a much different perspective. And one of the next tip that we need is we've got to get a better perspective. You see, the lens that you look through, the perspective that you look through, can mean that something that's quite minor seems monumental. Or it can take something that's quite monumental and make it seem quite manageable. All by the lens that you look through. So we've got to understand belief is key in strengthening our hull. Now, one of the other interesting myths that we've discovered, in fact, that there's been a whole lot of research that seems to back up this myth, and that's simply this, that stress in and of itself is bad for your health. Have you heard this? I mean, there's a whole lot of research to show that it's the case. But they've recently done other studies, longitudinal studies, where they followed and they interviewed and they watched a number of people in high-pressure jobs who experience a lot of stress in their life. And as they journeyed with them over a number of years, what they found was it did not affect their health at all, except when there was one variable present. And that variable was when they believed that stress was bad for their health. Isn't that interesting? It's the belief that was causing the problem, not the stress in and of itself. And so one of the things that we need to understand is that stress isn't something that we encounter, it's something that we produce because we believe we don't have the resources to cope with what's being asked. And now in that, a number of sort of common causes of stress that I'm going to sort of share with you. And I want you to reflect on which one of these seem to ring true for me. And let's see which ones we need to target in for you. You see, one of the first reasons why we get ourselves stressed is when we try to control the things that we just can't control. Have you ever been running late for an appointment, an event, and the slowest truck in the world pulls out in front of you? And what happens inside of you is that you just notice you're getting more frustrated, more tense, and everything in you just wants to go, move! As if my emotions could pick up that truck and put it down. Now, if we were to watch you as you go into the event to where you turn up to, guess how much your stress has helped? None. I mean, this is why the Bible says also about worry, that leave worry, because there's enough worry in today than even focusing on tomorrow. That worry never actually adds to your height. Oh, man, I wish that would be true. Or to your hair, or to your good looks. It doesn't give you anything. And so when we understand that this stress is useless. And so it's time to dial it back and realize, yes, I could get stressed, but my stress is going to achieve nothing right now. And usually we're getting stressed because we don't like what's going to happen in our mind. If I turn up late, they're going to be upset, they're going to be disappointed, I might miss something, I might fail something, whatever it might be, where actually it's probably not going to be that big a deal. We're going to focus on the worst case scenario rather than the most likely case scenario. You see, for me, I do my best to try to keep my kids safe. But could something happen to my kids that's beyond my control, beyond anything I could prepare for? Yeah, it could. But if I start focusing on that, guess what emotional state I would be in? I'd be a wreck. So in this, we understand that stress occurs when we try to control the things that we cannot control, but peace and enthusiasm comes when we prepare as best we can, then we make peace with where we're powerless, and we hand over to God the things that we just can't control. Another common cause of stress is the flip side of this. It's not where we're trying to control the things that we can't control. It's where we fail to do the things that we can. It's where we fail to control the things that we actually can control. You know, I have people come to me and they'll talk about their work situation. They'll talk about what they're carrying at work and how big it is and everything. And it is. It's immense. They're carrying a huge workload. And I'll say to them, is this sustainable? And they'll go, no, it's just not. And I'll say, so tell me, what kind of conversations have you had with the people who need to know about renegotiating what's going on in your life, about what you actually can do, and about handing over or delegating out other things? And they go, oh, well, I haven't said anything. Well, why not? Oh, well, because I want to look like I can handle it all. But can you? No. Okay, so you're just fooling everybody. What's going to happen in all of this? Well, I guess it's all going to turn to custard. So why don't you go and share? Well, then I feel like I'm letting people down. And what does that feel like? Yeah, that feels horrible. So it's actually this emotion that you're trying to avoid that means you're now not doing what you know you can do or should do. Whereas peace and enthusiasm comes when we actually do the things that we can, when we renegotiate in order to make ourselves sustainable with where we're at. The third common cause for stress happens when we get ourselves overwhelmed because we fail to recognize the sequence that's in front of us. I don't know about you, but I learned to drive a car in a manual. Everything seems to be an automatic these days for some reason. But as you may remember, in driving a manual, you had to work out when you got the clutch up and the accelerator down, when to indicate, when to check the rearview mirror, when to look over your shoulder, when to pull out, to do all of that stuff. And what I found when I was certainly starting out, I would try to do those things and I'd bunny hop my way to a stall. Now, why was that? Because I was trying to do it all at the same time. And what can get us stressed is when we think about all that's required of us and we assume we have to do it all right now. Whereas in fact, the reality is we need to focus on what's the next step in front of us. Focus on the sequence. What's the next thing that's required of me? And just do that. If you start thinking about everything that's required of you, you will stall your system. And you will feel overwhelmed, and the feeling of feeling overwhelmed will shut you down. But just because you feel overwhelmed doesn't mean you can't cope. It's just your brain's response. But you actually know what to do. What's the next thing I need to do? And then step out into that. A fourth common cause for stress is where we crucialize. It's where we add way too much meaning to something that's not all that important. I don't know if any of you, if you've ever had kids when they were young and you're trying to race out and get off to wherever you needed to go and you're running late, you always seem to be running late. And at that point, one of the kids says, I need to go to the toilet. Or someone says, I can't find my shoes. Or someone says, Jimmy's put chewing gum in his hair. And you go, oh, for goodness sake, how hard is it for you to get yourself organized? I do all this stuff, and all you have to do is find your shoes, go to the toilet, and not put chewing gum in Jimmy's ear. I don't know if that rings any bells. That's when you are crucializing or catastrophizing what's taking place. How important, honestly, is it to get out and get there on time? In a year's time from now, will you even remember this event? Probably not. So let's bring things back to their rightful perspective. The fifth common cause here of stress, which sounds like a funny one, is when you stress about being stressed. I don't know if you've got yourself into this. Oh my goodness, I'm stressed. Oh, I hate it when I'm stressed. Why am I so stressed? If only I didn't have to be stressed. Now, what happens when you do that is you keep telling your brain, I need more adrenaline. This isn't going well. And so your brain keeps dumping more and more adrenaline into your system. And so you wind yourself up until you're ready to pop. And this is what people would also do around the earthquake times, when we'd have an aftershock, wobble, wobble. And they'd go, and they go, oh no, I'm so anxious, I'm so stressed. I hate it when I'm anxious and stressed. Why do I have to be anxious and stressed? Why won't this stop? And what happens is you teach your body to remain stressed. So one of the things that I'll say is, in fact, stop stressing the stress. Notice your body's response. Whoa, my heart's really beating fast right now, isn't it? I'm getting quite short of breath. And speak back to your body. Thanks, adrenal gland. I don't really need the adrenaline right now. Everything's actually okay. Hey, body, it's all right. You can calm down. You speak to your body like you would a young child. And that's when you may practice what Paul was saying with your breathing techniques. I mean, one of the key breathing techniques that I'll teach people is the 5-5-5. You breathe in through your nose to the count of 5, you hold for the count of 5, and you breathe out through your mouth for the count of 5. And you do that 5 times. And you see, what that does is that counteracts the adrenaline. Because your body is in either one of 2 states. It's either in what's called a sympathetic state or a parasympathetic state. For sympathetic, think stressed. For parasympathetic, think relaxed. And when you breathe deeply, what you do is you flick your body over back into a relaxed state. So the adrenaline can drain and you can begin to think clearly again. And the final common cause is when we run low on our emotional energy. There's an old saying that goes, when the river runs low, the rocks show, which just means you're not going to handle things as well as you normally would. And so in this, one of the things that we need to be aware of is, are you connected to a replenishing source? You know, where does your Bible reading, your prayer, your exercise, your rest, your good food, where does that fit within your realm of looking after yourself? And in this, we need to be careful not to confuse recreation with entertainment. Because oftentimes we'll say, I just need a bit of downtime. I'm going to play a video game. I'm going to look at Facebook. I'm going to lose myself in front of TV. I just need a bit of downtime. But that's entertainment. And one of the things about entertainment, it does not recreate. It's a time out, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with a bit of time out. But it doesn't recreate. The key thing is what replenishes your source, your river, so that the water level doesn't run low. And we need to plug into that spiritually, emotionally, socially, intellectually, physically. We need to plug into these things that top us up. And when we're doing the things spiritually that top us up, we've got to make sure that they're not the things that we do because they are the right things, the things that we should do. But when we actually do them, I feel energized in Him. It's not that I just tick the box. I actually feel energized in Him. See, when you think about those common causes, those 6 common causes of stress, can you spot one that you might be more prone to? Yeah. And you see, when you start to realize that, now you can start to go to work on it. Because stress isn't in the environment. It comes from our response to that environment. So let us strengthen our hull, our mindset, our response to the environment, and we'll find that we're actually able to handle far more pressure than we've handled in the past.